Austria has announced a temporary suspension of the Schengen agreement at its borders. It now means the country will be checking the IDs of everyone who enters the nation. Migrants who have no right to asylum will be turned away. The country's chancellor announced the move in an interview with a Sunday newspaper, noting that if the EU cannot protect its external borders, the whole Schengen zone will be called into question. Werner Faymann also pointed out that in that case, each country has to protect its own borders. Austria has already increased border checks after it was revealed that many asylum seekers were travelling with fake documents and were lying about their identities. Since the beginning of the year, Austria has turned away some 3,000 migrants carrying false IDs. And in neighbouring Germany, Finance Minister there has called for a change to the constitution to allow the army to provide security inside the country. His call comes after the mass sex assaults in Cologne, where police were reportedly overwhelmed. Wolfgang Schäuble said that any other country in the world would deploy troops if police capabilities were exhausted. Currently, the German constitution only allows the military to carry out administrative and humanitarian missions inside the country. That happened in 2015, when around 7,000 soldiers helped to accommodate refugees in Germany. They built camps, provided healthcare and distributed food. Recently, though, it was announced that the project would stop this upcoming summer. Here's how the German Defense Minister explained the decision.
Assistance in situations of acute need should not become a permanent task for the German armed forces.
Well, that decision can't have been easy for the minister, who's known for her support of asylum seekers. She even hosted a young Syrian refugee in her own house from autumn 2014 to the following spring. He now lives in a separate flat and assists with helping other refugees. Well, for more on Europe's refugee policy, we now cross live to William Mallinson, a former British diplomat and author of Thrice a Stranger. Hi there, William. Germany, Sweden and now Austria have stepped up ID checks on their borders. What does this all mean for the Schengen agreement?
Well, thus far, the Schengen Agreement does make provision for what they would call exceptional measures. So this doesn't mean that de jure there is yet a complete collapse of Schengen. What it does mean is that we are seeing the beginning of a de facto collapse. Now, if this continues, then clearly Schengen will actually die. Now, if Schengen dies, one of the main pillars of the European, I call it federast ideal, dies with it. And to that extent, a lot of people would argue that Europe, in terms of what it was meant to do once upon a time in the West, is no longer doing it. And it's now become a banking union. It's become a mess. It's actually going through rigor mortis. Certain parts of Europe still work very effectively. One is, of course, the common agricultural policy. Some of the social policies still work. But even those social policies are now under enormous stress because of the banking fiasco and, of course, because of the refugee crisis. Let's not forget that Angela Merkel has already announced more than a year ago, that multiculturalism has failed. Europe is not a naturally multicultural country like, say, America and even Canada. It's a different ballgame altogether. So what we're also seeing here is the iniquitous effect of the wars of the West and NATO and America, which have caused this intrinsically. They have caused this. The Middle Eastern chaos is the direct cause of this crisis. Turkey has been very, very unhelpful, extremely unhelpful, firstly in supporting terrorist groups, secondly in still somehow not being able to prevent these hundreds of thousands, nearly a million refugees coming over to Europe, plus the fact that all these, a lot of passports are being forged. So it is in fact a major mess, and the moment you get armies involved, obviously by agreement, between Austria and Germany, things get totalitarian as well.
Well, that's what I want to mention, in fact. Sorry for interrupting, because we're seeing states sending in troops to enforce borders, aren't we? Is that the best way to guarantee security? They're saying it is.
In terms of crisis, and desperation and public image, it appears to be the best way. But of course, the damage has already been done. Right back when Europe expanded manically and stupidly so suddenly in 2004, there was already a problem, and people were saying that we need to have a proper coherent policy, but that just didn't happen. There was no Fortress Europe, like you have Fortress America, for example. One has to be realistic. You can't just welcome millions of people in just like that without planning and without thinking of the future, because the future means strife, trouble and strife. It's all been very, very badly organized, very badly done. The US is to blame, NATO is to blame, Turkey is to blame, Germany is to blame, and even France is to blame for coming to various agreements with Germany when they started the very common policy, which is also dying.
Just a point here that was quite worrying that caught our eye today was that of the issue of fake IDs. Austrian police have revealed that scores of asylum seekers have been travelling under those. How could that happen? Did they just turn a blind eye? Or we're talking about quite a lot of people being put through under these fake ID documents.
It's big business. And what hasn't yet been ascertained is who is running this show, because a lot of them are quite well produced, which means certain groups are actually making a lot of money and causing a lot of problems. And that is also part of the problem, because it's very difficult to distinguish between genuine refugees and those who are not genuine. And a huge number are not genuine. Many, many people from everywhere are jumping onto the bandwagon and coming in. And the point is that once they're in Europe, you see, they're allowed to go where they want. That's the idea of Europe. But it's no longer working. So, in fact, I would say that Schengen, at least, is in rigor mortis at the moment. Whether it can be revived, I don't know, because the only way to actually revive it, I'm afraid, is to send these people back. And that's where, actually, Russia is doing a good job, because I'm sure that if Syria had fallen into total chaos like Libya has, it would be even twice as bad now. But because of the Russian intervention, it's far less bad than it would be. And this is hypocritical of the West not to have recognized that. But behind all this, there's a huge strategic thing. America isn't displeased to see the problems that Europe is happening, because a strong Europe that goes toward Russia is anathema for the United States and for people like Henry Kissinger, because I've just finished writing a book about this and I've seen what he's written. It goes right back to more than 100 years. You must keep Europe away from Russia, and that means you must keep Germany away, because Germany now leads Europe. And if Germany is too nice to Russia, then Europe comes along, especially with the French, with Marine Le Pen, who's likely to win the next presidential elections, I think. And then that's a nightmare for the Americans, a Europe that's friendly to the Russians, like it was, remember, in 2003 with Schroeder and Chirac. But then they lost the elections, you see.
Yeah, a lot of issues at play there, isn't there? William, we're just running out of time. A number of stories to get through already this hour. We've been speaking to William Mallinson, former British diplomat, diplomatic historian, and whose new book is called Thrice a Stranger. We appreciate you taking the time to speak to us this hour. Thank you, William.